There's a golden rule that everything in entertainment follows. Save your best for last. If you manage to stick the landing so well that it becomes the high point of your product, then everything that preceded it ends up being looked back upon more favorably because it all led up to this defining moment. In sports, it's a championship game at the end of a season or a main event at the end of a card. In cinema, it's a climax of some kind to wrap up the narrative's plot. And in video games, it's the final boss.
The final boss of a video game has a lot of responsibility. It needs to deliver a satisfying conclusion to the game's narrative, it needs to have enough payoff to justify whatever hype it receives, and it needs to provide the player with the ultimate challenge to test all the skills they learned along the way. But more than anything else, it needs to create a moment, a lasting image, a memory that will stick with the player long after the credits have rolled. In short, it needs to be more epic, more challenging, and more memorable than everything and anything that came before. So here, we're going to go over the final bosses that in my gaming experience have done this better than any others. And because this is the Season 1 finale, I figured instead of doing just 10, we'd bump it up to 20. Obviously, these are just my favorites and not the be-all end-all best final bosses in gaming, so if there's a game with a really good final boss that I don't discuss here, then please leave it in the comments so I can think about what I might want to take a stab at in the future. But for now, the rules are simple. Only games I've played, only one per franchise, and obviously, watch out for spoilers. Let's close out Season 1 with a bang. I have a soft spot for the Subspace Emissary. I know it didn't really succeed in what it set out to do, but I love the ambition on display throughout the entire adventure mode, and I hope they take a crack at it again in the future. The big bad of Brawl's adventure mode is Taboo, some sort of supernatural being that rules over subspace as a god. He has no personality and his motives are never really explained, but Taboo will live in infamy for that one time where he spreaded butterfly wings and took out the entire roster of Nintendo's heavy hitters in one fell swoop. So to get another shot at the long-lost cousin at Dr. Manhattan, you must fight through subspace and trudge through the entire Great Maze, fighting every boss and fighter you've encountered on your journey. Once you've conquered the maze, Taboo will attempt to red ring you all over again, only to be stopped by a quick round of Genesis does what Nintendo don't before the fight starts proper. Even on easier difficulties, Taboo is no slouch. He has a ton of powerful ranged attacks, and it usually takes only 1 or 2 hits to send a character flying off the screen. Every other boss in the game gives you a maximum of 4 characters, but for Taboo, you get 6. And trust me, you're probably gonna need them all. Especially when he busts out the wings, shoots the red rings, you think bad things, and the fat lady sings. But when you finally manage to land the finishing blow, Taboo disintegrates, the Great Maze collapses, and the world is returned to normal. It's nowhere near the deepest or highest quality final boss, but it is a treasured memory of my childhood, as was beating him to finally complete boss battles on Intense.
Who's your daddy?
From the moment the Nintendo Wii hit store shelves in 2006, all anyone wanted to do was have some kind of sword fight. It took a little while, but we finally got there after the creation of Wii Motion Plus and the release of Red Steel 2 with its final boss, Shinjiro. As a former Kusagari, Shinjiro has wiped out the rest of the clan in his attempt to secure the Kusagari sword. He keeps his Kusagari fighting style, using dark versions of your various abilities. Couple this with his lightning-fast agility, and he can be a real challenge if you're not prepared. But what keeps him at only number 19 is that even if it's your first playthrough, if you've upgraded your equipment and mastered your techniques, then you will be prepared, and Shinjiro might not put up that much of a fight. But even if you're vastly overpowered, that doesn't change the fact that this boss knocks it out of the park when it comes to the atmosphere. The battle takes place at the top of a temple with the sun rising, as the last 2 swordsmen left in Caldera do battle while the music accentuates the game's beautiful mix of Old West and Far East, right up until the hero with no name lands the killing blow, delivers a final one-liner, and stares off into the sunrise as the credits roll. Definitely not the deepest battle, but there's something to be said for spectacle. Some franchises are tailor-made for incredible boss fights. Sonic the Hedgehog is not one of them. I love the series as much as anyone, but the strength of these games has always been the speed and platforming, which isn't easy to translate to a boss without putting the blue blur in auto-run mode. But when all 7 Chaos Emeralds are brought into the equation and Sonic can go super, then we're playing with a whole new set of rules. Most of the 3D supersonic bosses are kind of middle of the road, but the best of the bunch comes from what is widely regarded as the best 3D game in the series, Sonic Adventure 2's Final Hazard. The premise of the Final Hazard is fairly simple. The Bio-Lizard has fused with the Space Colony Ark and aims to bring it down on the planet Majora style, so it's up to Supersonic and Super Shadow to stop the prototype of the ultimate life form before it's too late. All you need to do is fly through space and dodge the Bio-Lizard's lasers and energy balls to hit its weak points. But let's talk about the true star of this fight. It's not the setting, it's not the boss, it's not even the hedgehogs. No, the standout star of Sonic Adventure 2's climax is its music. Live and Learn is Crush 40's magnum opus, and my all-time favorite piece of gaming music. Just hearing that iconic first note is enough to get my blood pumping. The only thing holding the Final Hazard back is that since it plays nothing like the rest of the game, the controls can take a little bit to get the hang of. But when the final blow is landed and the Ark is placed back into orbit while Shadow plummets to the Earth below, having fulfilled Maria's dying wish, it's all the satisfaction a fan of 3D Sonic could ask for. You know, aside from a Sonic Adventure 3. Just saying. An important part of making final bosses is knowing how much build-up they require. There are plenty of final fights where not much hype is needed, and we'll get to a few of those later, but in terms of building up anticipation for a final boss, there are few better examples than the Archdemon from Dragon Age Origins. Almost from the moment that the Darkspawn are introduced, the player is made to understand that this big scary demon dragon is the ultimate threat to Ferelden, and you won't be able to finish the game until it's been slayed. But even getting to that point is emotionally taxing, as not only is the Archdemon the subject of a few nightmares of your protagonists, you'll find out the night before the battle that in order to make sure it's truly defeated, a Grey Warden needs to land a killing blow, giving their life in the process. And seeing as the only two Grey Wardens up to the task are you and Alistair, unless you spared Loghain for some reason, that means someone in your party you care about will not survive the battle. Or, you can do what I did and not have to deal with that predicament because I romanced Morgan the whole way and that girl came in clutch with a heck of a loophole.
What I propose is this. Lay with me, here tonight, and from our joining, a child will be conceived.
I see this as an absolute win.
Before the fight with the Archdemon begins, you need to fight through hordes of Darkspawn in a battle that to me is the gaming equivalent of Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings. You have forces from across Ferelden at your disposal, but that won't be enough unless you get right into the thick of it and get your hands very dirty. When the dragon finally appears, it takes everything you got to take it out, including the occasional shot from a giant crossbow and fighting off even more Darkspawn. I wish I could go into more detail, but even though I did beat the game, I'm not very good at Dragon Age, so I'm not really the best person to ask for advice.
Really, the only advice I can give is to play Dragon Age Origins, because it's a great game with a great final boss.
The crocodiles in Far Cry 3 might be the closest a game has come to getting me to wet myself, but I've had beef with these ruthless, ravenous, rambunctious reptiles since one of them thought it was a good idea to come in on a pirate ship and steal all my bananas. The final battle with King K. Rool from the original Donkey Kong Country is an out-and-out classic. The king of the critters is no slouch, but the fight is still simple enough that anyone can stand a chance with a little practice. K. Rool will charge at you, jump around the deck, drop cannonballs, and toss his crown at you. Doing this last attack will leave his head exposed, allowing you to jump on him and do damage. I remember my first encounter with K. Rool like it was yesterday. I'm taking on the boss, I'm down to my last life, but I managed to finally hit the finishing blow. The credits begin to roll, and I rush out of the room to grab my friend to show him that I finally beat Donkey Kong Country. But when I returned, to my horror, I was greeted with the game over screen. What happened?
I can't believe you fell for the oldest trick in the book! What a goof! What's with you, man? Come on!
Yeah, that's right. In one of the cruelest plot twists in gaming history, the credits turned out to be fake and young me bought it hook, line, and sinker. Once my friend was done laughing at me and I came to terms with the fact I would now have trust issues for the rest of my life, I sat down and didn't get out of my chair again until I claimed victory for real. There aren't many final bosses that have put me through the emotional ringer in the way King K. Rool did. And I haven't even talked about the auditory crack that is the fight's music, Gangplank Galleon. This song was an all-time great even before K. Rool sailed his ship to Hoenn on the way to Smash Bros. The best thing about the plot of Doom 2016 is how Doom Guy doesn't give a rip about any of it on account of him being too busy ripping literally everything else.
I'm sure that Olivia Pierce had a really interesting fall from grace that led her to becoming the Spider Mastermind, but I hate spiders, I have guns, and I plan to put them to use.
Fighting the Spider Mastermind has a certain rhythm to it, as you need to balance avoiding the Big Ugly's attacks while successfully sending your shots to their proper destination. And seeing how much gray matter this boss puts on display, that destination should be quite obvious. But don't let that make you think that this fight is a cakewalk. The Spider Mastermind has a variety of attacks that allow it to hurt you anywhere in the arena, including one where the ground gets covered in some sort of poison and you need to jump onto these platforms that rise up from the ground. But some of those platforms can explode or get covered in thorns. You'll have access to some spare BFG ammo, which you can use to deal direct damage dumps to that deadly demon's dome. Landing these hits with the big mean killing machine could be the difference between failure and solving Olivia's headache, sore throat, dental, and possession problems all at once with a big kiss from the big gun. You then get pulled out of hell for some quick sequel bait, but the fight is just as blood pumping as everything else in Doom 2016 and the perfect way to cap off the best shooter of the 2010s. By the time I got to the final battle of Shadow of the Colossus, I was exhausted. The closer you get to the end of the game, the more the game's depressing atmosphere will get to you. You'll really start to wonder if slaying all these giant beasts is worth it, and yet you've come to the point where there's no turning back. And just when you are finally getting close to the fight, you lose your horse aggro, forcing you to make the rest of the trek on foot. You'll enter some ruins, and by the time you get back outside, the skies turn dark and a storm is brewing as you spot some sort of tower in the distance. Then the tower begins to stir, and the horrible realization washes over you that your final battle is against a beast twice as tall as anything that came before. The fight with Malice starts, and right away it's unlike anything you've faced up to this point. Malice can't move, but he doesn't need to, as he can hit you with powerful projectiles and pinpoint accuracy. The only option is to take cover as you make your way to his base. From there you begin the most difficult climb in the game, requiring a few pinpoint stabs, one really challenging arrow spot, and a whole lot of holding on for dear life. Once you get to the top of his head, Malice's sole weak point appears, and now it's just a matter of stabbing it with your sword until he finally dies. What makes the Malice fight so effective is how it stands out from every other battle in Shadow of the Colossus. With the rest of the fights in this game, the soundtrack switches to triumphant music when you successfully figure out what to do. With Malice, in addition to the dark and stormy night, you start the fight with the incredibly somber Demise of the Ritual playing, and that's all you get. At no point does anything in this fight give you even a shred of catharsis, but that's the point. You've spent the entire game doing something you really weren't supposed to do, and now it is all catching up to you. It's not the type of conclusion to get your spirits up, but if you've gotten this far into Shadow of the Colossus, then you knew what you signed up for. So far on this list, we've seen final bosses from fighting games, shooters, platformers, action games, and RPGs. But at number 13, we have a boss from a music game, and just by saying that, you all know who it is. In a scenario I'm sure plenty of musicians find all too familiar, you accidentally sell your soul to your manager, aka the devil, and the only way to get it back is to descend into the inferno and win it back in a guitar battle. The final boss against Lou from Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock is a duel for the ages, as you play and reenact a rock version of the country classic The Devil Went Down to Georgia, and use the power-ups you get to try and sabotage Lou while he does the same to you. If you can drain his rock meter before the end of the song, you'll have a chance to play a finisher to put an end to this malicious manager once and for all. If you don't, then Lou will perform his own finisher on you, and frankly the results of what he plays are downright insulting.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay? No more!
Stop! He's already dead!
Oh,
I don't know if I'm alone in my opinions on number 12 or not, but like everything else in Horizon Zero Dawn, I thoroughly enjoyed the final battle against Hades. Following the silencing of Solaire's stunningly stupid, sadistic stepbrother, you fight off waves of attacking machines with a big post-apocalyptic grenade launcher and make your way to the top of the Meridian Spire where the AI Hades is aiming to exterminate all life on the planet via the Pharaoh Plague. And to ensure its success, Hades brought along a friend, a reinforced Deathbringer. This isn't the first time Aloy encounters one of these crazy killing machines, but it is the first time you fight one at full strength without the benefit of that previously mentioned grenade launcher. The key is to get the Deathbringer to overheat, so anything that does fire damage is a good way to expose its weak points. There'll also be corruptors that show up, which are also best dealt with via pyrotechnics. You'll need to watch out for the Deathbringer's firepower, especially since any cover you can take will not last long. The only thing keeping this fight down is that it's against something you've fought already rather than a brand new enemy, but it plays so well that can be forgiven. And to anyone who says that the Deathbringer should be given this spot rather than Hades, I respond with this.
Aren't we forgetting one teensy weensy but ever so crucial little tiny detail? I own you!
Pikmin is a franchise all about unit management, time management, and most of all, multitasking. And nowhere are these skills more of a necessity than against the final boss of Pikmin 3, the Plasm Wraith. During development of Pikmin 3, Shigeru Miyamoto said that he wanted to bring the stress back to the series that was toned down in Pikmin 2. I think it's fair to chalk that one up as a mission accomplished. Found in the formidable oak holding Olimar and by extension the Cosmic Drive Key hostage, this ghastly golden glob of goop is hands down the most stressful thing to be found in the entire series.
Well, maybe with the exception of the Water Wraith, but if those two are related, then I am not a fan of the family business.
The first part of this fight is working your way out of the giant tree while the Wraith relentlessly chases after the comatose captain. The key is to have Brittany lead the Pikmin carrying Olimar while Alph and Charlie clear the path ahead of all enemies and obstacles. This means in addition to working through a fairly challenging dungeon, you need to keep an eye on how close the boss is to the portion of your party protecting Olimar. And if the Wraith does manage to catch up, it will grab Olimar and take him back to the top of the tree. If you don't manage to get him back in time, then the day ends right then and there. Once you manage to get out of the tree with Olimar in tow, the Plasm Wraith will take proper shape and the combat portion of the fight commences. The key is to destroying the puddles of goop that it shoots out while avoiding its attempts to grab and eat your Pikmin. Upon losing health, it will also start using attacks of each element that you will need specific Pikmin to counter. Your best bet is to form a party of about 30 rock Pikmin and just attack the crystal cubes whenever they're used and leave the rest of your troops at home because they can be grabbed and devoured real fast. But even if you do take a more cavalier approach, each phase of the battle can take multiple in-game days, so hopefully you have plenty of juice stashed up. It may be stressful, but there is no hurdle more satisfying to overcome in the entire series. As we get into the top 10 of this countdown, we must ask ourselves if a final boss can be eligible if it's the only boss that a game has. In the end, I decided if it's a boss that is the final obstacle of the game in question, then that's enough to earn a spot on this list. So for that, Wheatley from Portal 2 qualifies. Choosing between GLaDOS and Wheatley was tough, but since the latter fight has both characters, that means it ends up being twice as funny. Before the fight starts, Wheatley explains his brilliant 4-part plan to defeat you, and the plan is foolproof, or it would have been if not for the fact that Wheatley is a total fool. Unlike in the GLaDOS fight where you remove and destroy the cores, this time you add cores to Wheatley to neutralize him. Do this 3 times and the stalemate button will appear. You then go press it and this is where things really go off the deep end.
Part 5! Booby trap the stalemate button! What? Are you still alive?
He said it! He said it!
You are joking! You have got to be kidding me! Well, I'm still in control, and I have no idea how to fix this place. Expel them! Space!
There really isn't anything more for me to say. The fight plays well, the writing's impeccable, and the ending is so brilliantly insane I could almost forgive Valve if they never make another Portal game. Almost.
Choosing a final boss from the Pokemon series made picking between GLaDOS and Wheatley feel like trying to decide between chicken wings and rotting onions. Blue from Kanto and Red from Johto both had good cases, but in the end, well, I'm a Hoenn guy.
Hey, phrasing!
I know picking the champion from my favorite Pokemon game reeks of favoritism, but since this is my list, that's kind of the point. After fighting your way through the Elite Four, the only thing standing between you and victory is Steven, and he's not letting you through without a fight. Mr. Stone is a specialist in the Steel type and rare stones, as his name implies, and this is reflected in his team, which is a blend of Steel types and Fossil Pokemon. He starts with a Skarmory, which will set up the rest of his team with spikes, and use Toxic to badly poison whatever member of your team is unfortunate enough to start the battle. He has both a Cradily and an Armaldo to deal with your ground and fire types respectively, and an Aggron that will successfully tank against basically anything that doesn't have fighting or ground type moves. Speaking of fighting, it can get you through a good chunk of the battle, but Steven has a plan for the fighting type as well, in the form of a Claydol with extra sensory as well as both Light Screen and Reflect.
And now we come to his final Pokemon. Seeing as this was Gen 6 and I had watched Hoenns out one too many times before the game's release, I was fully expecting to come face to face with a Mega Aggron.
That was my prize mistake. A failure of imagination.
It didn't even cross my mind that Steven would have something way worse up his sleeve until it was staring me dead in the face in the form of a Mega Metagross. Armed with Bullet Punch, Zen Headbutt, Meteor Mash, and Giga Impact, this thing will have a response to basically any strategy you might have been using up until this point. Luckily, I had put together what would go down as my all-time favorite team, and every single member also possessed the ability to Mega Evolve. In the end, it came down to just my starter, and after a few Earthquakes from my Mega Swampert, I was able to finally put Steven's team down and claim the Hoenn League Championship. It was a thrill I hadn't felt since my first playthrough of Pokemon Sapphire, and for a few minutes there, I truly felt like the very best, like no one ever was. Even though it is my favorite franchise in gaming history, the Batman Arkham series had to go through a few growing pains when it came to its bosses. Arkham Asylum's boss battles were notoriously weak when compared to the rest of the game, particularly its final boss, Titan Joker.
Yes, well, this is all tremendously boring.
If you're making a Batman game with a Mark Hamill voiced Joker as its primary antagonist, then he needs to be the final villain standing in the way of the world's greatest detective. So riddle me this. How do you make a boss fight with the Joker that is also a physical challenge for the Caped Crusader without making it suck? Answer. You bring in his stunt double.
In the climax of my favorite game of all time, Batman is tasked with defeating Clayface to get the Titan Antidote inside of the very same theater from which Bruce Wayne and his parents departed on that fateful night so many years ago. This was a plot twist that took me completely by surprise my first time, despite all of the signs throughout the game hitting me in the face with a good old bat slap. The fight consists of dodging Clayface's attacks while pelting him with as many freeze grenades as you can muster. If you can manage to get him to charge into one of the quarters of the theater, he will set off some planted explosions for even more damage. Eventually, Joker will blow up the floor and you will have to finish the fight in the Lazarus Chamber. At this point, Clayface will start spawning clay minions to attack you, so in addition to hitting him with even more freeze grenades, you will need to pick up the sword and pretend that you're playing Dynasty Warriors. Do this enough, and Clayface will get dumped into the Lazarus Pit, causing it to explode and allowing Batman to grab and take the cure. Overall, this fight is a great time. The villain took me by surprise, the battle takes full advantage of Arkham's revolutionary combat system, and it leads to one of the best endings in both gaming and superhero history. A satisfying conclusion to a phenomenal game. For a game all about battling stupidly hard bosses that make you want to split a coffee table in half karate style, the final fight of Cuphead had a lot to live up to, and I'm glad to say that the devil definitely doesn't disappoint. Like everything else in the game, the fight consists of shooting the boss while dodging the attacks that come from literally every direction. Just in the first form alone, the devil will shoot various projectiles from his pitchfork, extended arms and attack from both sides of the screen, turn his head into a spider and drop on you from above, become a dragon and take up almost the entire screen, and all the while little devils are running in both directions just to make your life that much more difficult. From there, you need to descend deeper into Inkwell Hell, where you'll now need to fight a giant version of the devil on 5 tiny platforms. It won't take long for those 5 platforms to become 3 and eventually 1. And believe me, when you lose on that last platform mere inches from victory, it is infuriating. The thing is, that's kind of the whole point. This fight is without a doubt the hardest on this list, but like the rest of Cuphead, it only incentivizes you to keep going and take another attempt. And when you finally get that knockout and free Inkwell from the devil once and for all, it is so unbelievably cathartic. It's only helped by the game's masterful presentation. Cuphead is the kind of game that will age very well, meaning this fight is set for a future as a timeless and turbulent trial of true tenacity. While it doesn't really stack up to the very best of the Arkham series, the one thing Marvel's Spider-Man has them all beaten is the final boss department, because the battle with Dr. Octopus on top of the Oscorp building is as emotional as it is exhilarating. The whole time while you swing around and shoot webs at the bad doctor, Peter is pleading with his former mentor to give him the cure to save New York, while Octavius is so far gone that he's willing to let countless people die in order to exact his revenge on Norman Osborn. And it's not like Doc Ock lived long enough to see himself become the villain off-screen. Oh no. You get to see his full decline into madness from the start, making him a far more sympathetic character than any other member of Spidey's rogues gallery to be found in this game. The fight hits the same notes as Clayface, but the location and Spider-Man's increased agility allow for a more fast-paced and fluid battle as you rock and sock Doc Ock around the block. It isn't too complicated, just dodge anytime your spider sense goes off and slow down his robot arms via your web shooters, but it's so fast paced and cinematic that it feels like you're playing the final climax of a really good Spider-Man movie. Add in that the fight accomplishes this with minimal QuickTime events, and you have the new benchmark for all superhero bosses going forward, or at least the ones involving heroes with superpowers.
Oh shit.
We are screwed!
That's not gonna be good for anybody.
There is absolutely nothing in Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island that will prepare you for the shock and horror that is giant baby Bowser. I don't care how unmacho it sounds, seeing this giant baby Koopa moving towards you with those soulless eyes is nothing short of terrifying. You get no instructions on how to deal with the huge monstrosity quickly closing in on you from the background, but you better figure it out fast. Shooting eggs into the background as opposed to across it is something you'll need to just get to grips with if you want to see this fight through to the other side. Add on the fireballs he shoots your way and the rocks that rain down and take more and more of your space to move away from you with the frantic music that's playing the whole time, and you get a battle so intense it's easy to forget that you're playing a game starring this thing. Once you get a handle on what's happening, the fight isn't actually all that daunting, but I can't remember another time playing a Mario game where I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Bowser has had more appearances as a final boss than just about any other character in video games, but the Yoshi's Island battle remains the gold standard and has yet to be topped.
For those of you keeping score at home, so far we've had 4 giant reptiles, 3 machines, 2 devils, 2 supervillains, and 2 giant gelatinous monstrosities. And now, we have our second Hades.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
The final battle of Kid Icarus Uprising against the Lord of the Underworld is one mind-blowing set piece after another. As we learned from Chapter 23, taking on Hades with a normal weapon would be a one-way trip to Failure Town, Population U. Luckily, Pit has learned from his mistakes, and this time comes equipped with the Great Sacred Treasure, a giant mech that adapts and changes form as it takes damage throughout the fight. Not to be outdone, Hades will also change forms as he is damaged, and each attack is bigger and scarier than the last. Some highlights include outrunning Hades through a canyon, fighting through the rainbow apocalypse he calls his Devastation Ensemble to slice him clean in half, having Medusa reappear to punch her master's head clean off, to charging up and delivering one final super laser to finish off the god of the underworld for good. The writing is also on top form, particularly for Hades as he makes sure his final showdown with Pity Pat is one to remember.
Hades! 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 Hades!
number 3 and number 2 final bosses on this list were basically neck and neck. They are almost identical in structure, and they come from very similar games on the same console. So as soon as I reveal what's number 3, you'll be able to add up what's coming in at number 2.
Nobody said they'd be mad!
There is nothing traditional about Mad World, and that goes doubly so for the Black Baron. Most final bosses have some sort of build-up or a connection to the protagonist of some kind. In the case of the Bishop of Blood and Carnage, he's just the last guy standing in the way of Jack Kamen on his way to being the winner of Deathwatch. And even though you've seen the Baron plenty of times throughout the game courtesy of the Bloodbath challenges, at no point is it hinted that the man who dies 11 times over at the hands of his hoe is going to be your final obstacle on your bloody path to the top. The setting of this battle could not be more perfect. A sky-high boxing arena surrounded by an audience made up of the survivors of Deathwatch. In your corner, you have the geishas you saved in the bistro level, which can toss you health items if you get in a pinch. In the Baron's corner, he has Matilda, and if you get knocked out of the ring, you just might find yourself being used for batting practice. Now let's discuss the music, because it's a big part of this battle. The first theme of the fight is Look Pimpin', and it's a very laid-back song that portrays the Black Baron as someone who thinks of Jack as little more than a minor nuisance. But after you win the first round of the best power struggle in the game, the Baron loses his cool and the music changes to the much angrier So Cold, which lets you know that in no uncertain terms, you have royally ticked the Baron off, and he won't hold back until he takes you out for good. This is also where more of his supernatural attacks come into play, including a lightning kick from the top turnbuckle, a giant fist projectile that can serve you up to Matilda on a silver platter, and an insta-death black hole. To counter all of this, you of course have your chainsaw. But in my opinion, if you really want to experience this fight at its best, you will listen to the announcers, forego the chainsaw, and fight the Baron toe-to-toe and fist-to-fist. This is a battle that doesn't really set out to break any new ground, but like the Black Baron himself, it is dripping in style and swag. And after one more round of man darts, the Baron is at last gone for good. At least until you play Anarchy Reigns. I hear he's actually black in that game.
As I said before, now that I revealed the Black Baron at number 3, you probably already know who's coming in now. But just in case you don't, allow me to give the number 2 final boss the introduction he so richly deserves.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, from the Emerald Isle, wielding the original Kylo Ren crossbeam, my number 2 favorite final boss of all time, the amazing flying Irishman himself, Mr. Sir Henry Oh yes, the final battle of the original No More Heroes is what happens when you take the fight with the Black Baron, strip away all the pageantry and gravitas, but go all in on the spectacle. By this point, the plot of No More Heroes has wrapped up, and the only thing left to do is determine which of these twin brothers is superior with a beam katana by taking things outside to be settled in the parking lot. The game sets this battle up as a duel of evenly matched opponents, but by the time that Mr. Cooldown finishes his first combo, you'll realize just how much of an underdog you really are in this fight. He has an absurd amount of health and takes upwards of 1,000 hits to defeat on the hardest difficulty. And while I normally despise losing to one-hit KO attacks, most one-hit KO attacks don't look like this.
I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
Finally, there's the theme for this battle, We Are Finally Cowboys. It's a theme I actually didn't really care for a long time, but in recent years has really grown on me, and I've come to appreciate just how impressive that guitar riff truly is. I love this battle so much, I keep a save file on my copy of No More Heroes that is set right before this fight, so I can replay it as many times as I want. I've probably beaten Henry more times than any other final boss on this countdown. The final battle against Ganon from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is the most iconic final boss in gaming history. This is a fight that has inspired almost every final boss to come along since. Everything about this battle, from the build-up to the music, the atmosphere, the fight itself, and the finish cement this fight as a masterpiece, but it's not on this list. Why? Well, just like most things from Ocarina of Time, I just think Twilight Princess does it better. By the time he shows up as the final boss of Twilight Princess, Ganondorf has assumed the role of the last opponent about half a dozen times throughout the series. But nothing up until this point can compare to this epic 4-part fight with the King of Evil. At the start of the fight, Ganondorf possesses Zelda, and after drawing her weapon Yoda style, takes Link on in a traditional bout of energy tennis as a twisted version of Zelda's lullaby plays in the background. Following a fused shadow-powered exorcism of Hyrule's princess courtesy of the Twilight Princess, the second phase of the fight begins as Ganondorf takes on his Ganon form, prompting you to morph into Wolf Link and fight him beast to beast. In this form, the big bad bacon boy can teleport around the arena and attack from any direction, and if you never got the hang of wrangling goats back in Ordon Village, this form can be quite the hassle. It's at this point upon beating Ganon that Zelda finally wakes up to join the party. But even with wisdom and courage back at full strength, the wielder of the Triforce of Power refuses to go quietly, even after Midna literally brings the house down on him. Thankfully, having Zelda back means finally having access to light arrows, and so the third phase of this fight is waged on horseback as Link mans the reins and attacks Ganondorf whenever Zelda manages to stun him with the light arrow. And so we come to the fourth and last phase of this gauntlet of a final boss. Ganondorf seals himself and Link in a barrier of twilight and finally draws his sword. What follows is a sword duel for the ages, finally delivering on what was teased at Space World 2000 all those years ago. Ganondorf is just as good with a blade as you would expect him to be, and you'll need to call upon all your skills, including a few learned from the hero of time himself. And while the music has been top-notch throughout the whole fight, nothing can come close to topping the version of Ganon's theme, complete with ominous chanting that plays during the duel. In the end, Link drives the Blade of Evil's bane straight through Ganondorf's cold heart before Zant reappears one last time to put the finishing touch on the demise of the man bearing the curse of demise. There has never been a final boss in any video game that has blown me away as much as Ganondorf has. The atmosphere is foreboding and daunting, the music is ominous and epic, each phase tests the various different skill sets you've gained throughout the adventure, and it culminates with the one-on-one sword duel between the hero of Hyrule and the King of Evil that has yet to be topped by any Zelda final boss since, and is my all-time favorite final boss in video game history. I can't wait to experience the battle we get when Ganondorf finally returns in the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Maybe in that fight he won't get distracted by fishing rods. One can only hope. That is all.